Hello and welcome to today's webinar, Energy Star Higher Education Benchmarking Initiative 2.0. We will start right now. So welcome to today's webinar and thank you very much for joining us today. Before we begin, I'm going to run through a couple of housekeeping items. There will be a Q&A session at the end of this presentation. You can submit questions for the Q&A session via the chat box to the host. To access the chat box, hover your mouse over the bottom of the screen and click the bubble icon. A link to a recording of this session and presentation slides will be sent to all registrants after the webinar. That is it for me. I will pass things over to Brendan Hall to start today's presentation.
Thank you, and thank all of you for joining today. Hopefully you're in the right place. We're going to talk about the second round of Energy Star's Higher Education Benchmarking Initiative. All right, so without further ado, the agenda today, I'll sort of give an overview of the initiative, including the first round, since this is the second sort of cycle we're going through this year. Talk through how to participate. So that's really the main point of this webinar, is to go through the submission guidelines and instructions, and then leave time for Q&A, since it's a little complicated and we also want to leave plenty of time for your questions. All right, so about the initiative, first I want to give a little context about the Energy Star program in case you aren't familiar with it. So it's a long-standing, almost 30 years, I think, or a little over 30 years long program at EPA that focuses on energy performance in sort of across the economy. Our particular part of the program focuses on buildings, and we do that through a few different ways. We offer recognition for top performance, tools and resources to help you along the way. And sort of the main thing we start with is a commitment to energy efficiency. So I have a few questions here on this slide that are meant to sort of ask, are you, as attendees, your organizations, participating sort of across our program in these different ways? So that's Energy Star. And we started, so I'm the higher education lead for our buildings program at EPA Energy Star. And we started this new initiative in 2020, the Higher Education Benchmarking Initiative, or HEBI. And I'll probably be using that acronym a lot just because it's a mouthful. So the initiative was really aiming at trying to drive action and dialogue on energy efficiency at colleges and universities on their, in their buildings. And it was also intended to overcome some barriers to efficiency in the sector, namely sort of incomplete coverage of building level metering for all fuels. So that makes it difficult to track energy use at a building level, which is sort of a tenet of our program. That's one. Incomplete coverage of 1 to 100 Energy Star scores, which is sort of our bread and butter offering that is a peer performance rating. It's available for many property types, but not all the ones that are typically found in a higher education campus. And the last one is, from one institution to the next, there are very different property type compositions and therefore energy demands. So it can be difficult to compare from one institution to the next, sort of how am I doing? And so those three sort of barriers were things we tried to overcome through this initiative. The way we did that is asking people to submit their data at a campus level, energy use data, optionally water data, and characteristics about their campus and institution that we use to create peer groups. And then sort of what participants get back is a scorecard that shows how they're performing against peers on their campus energy and water performance. This is information that's individualized. They're getting their own scorecards for each campus they submit. It's also free. There's no cost. Obviously, there's some time to put in to get this across the line, but it's a free offering from EPA. We're also very careful to not share data outside of EPA, your data will remain anonymous. So in the scorecards, you'll just see your performance compared to a bunch of other sort of anonymous campuses. And the last bullet on this slide is just meant to say, while I'm really excited about this initiative and the second round getting underway, also see it as an opportunity to push our other goals in the sector to try and drive energy performance, including potentially trying to work with industry associations to get a survey that could lead to more 1 to 100 Energy Star scores and the ability to certify more buildings in the sector. So that's my little dream with this initiative. All right, so in the first round, which started again in 2020, we asked for calendar year 2019 data, so January through December, and delivered scorecards based on that data in 2021. We were really happy with our participation in the first round. We had about 200 participating campuses from over 100 institutions. For those of you that didn't participate, we also developed a summary scorecard that's linked here, and the thumbnail images are referring to that. That summary scorecard sort of looks in aggregate across all the first round participants to try and show some trends, try and get at what are some possible relationships between performance and different characteristics. So if you're again someone who didn't participate, or someone like an association or company that works in this space, it could be interesting to dig in there. We also did a follow-up survey to first round participants, and I'm happy to say we had very positive feedback. I'll share a couple of quick examples of that in the next slide. And we also got some input on how we could make the initiative even better. And I've listed those things out here. I'm not going to go into each one individually, but just mention that we really took those things to heart and are trying to build the second round of the HEBI based on that feedback. Okay, and just for reference, we have a couple of example charts and graphs from a scorecard from the first round. We're hoping that this year's scorecards look even nicer, but Hopkinsville Community College, a first round participant, was kind enough to allow us to share some examples here. So you can see sort of the blue line, which is their performance, and then the green being other participants. And again, we'll take that same sort of anonymized approach in the second round. And here are the survey results I was referring to. We saw people give back a rating of 7.3 out of 10 in terms of the value they got from the scorecards. I mean, there's no scale there, but except for 1 through 10, but we were pretty happy to see that sort of overall as a good statement on the value of the initiative. And we also saw 100% of participants say they would be likely to participate in the second round. So very hopeful that ends up being the case. So yeah, but that was a great result. And one other last thing here on the summary scorecard, I just wanted to highlight a few other items from it. So we have some testimonials here from first round participants, as well as a list of all the inaugural round participants that were okay with being publicly listed. So do encourage you, if you didn't participate, to look at that, or even if you did but haven't looked at it in a minute, just to get an overall sense of the initiative and the results that we saw and who was involved. Okay, with that, I'm going to transition here a little bit into the second round. So we are now open for reporting for the second round as of July 1st, and the submissions will close September 1st of 2022. So still a month and a half, very early. But anyway, our goal is to deliver scorecards under that timeline, late 2022, later this year. And we're also hoping that, sort of aligned with first round feedback, that we can create peer groups that are based on 2 or more variables, which was would be a big change, but since the first round, they were all based on single characteristics. A few other differences from the first round will also be allowing a new way to compare your residential building data against that of others, sort of separate from the campus level submission. And we'll be doing additional follow-up on data quality. So if someone's data looks inaccurate, we'll reach out to them, give them a time frame to respond, and if they do it, then they'll make the cut and be in the initiative. If not, then unfortunately we won't be able to include them and give them a scorecard. Last but not least, we created a new web page for the initiative. It has all the instructions for participating in the second round, as well as a lot of other things, including a reference copy of the supplemental survey, a toolkit with social media posts that you can use to share with others that you're participating. Energy Star is a good brand, so it's always a way to get a little more street cred and talk about your participation in something like this. We'll have FAQs sort of as they come into us that we'll be posting those up there. And we'll have a recording of this webinar once it's ready. And again, you can see the summary scorecard from the first round on that webpage. All right, so how to participate in the second round. So this is, again, sort of the main point of this webinar, along with the Q&A portion. So let's get into it. I'm going to start off with a submission checklist, just to give you an overall sense of what participating will mean. So there are 3 main steps involved in submitting your data and participating. The first is benchmarking in Energy Star Portfolio Manager. So if you're already benchmarking in Energy Star Portfolio Manager, you can skip that step, of course, while still making sure that you're sort of aligning with our instructions, but that should be pretty easy. But if you're not already benchmarking in the tool, we think we have a way that will allow you to participate pretty easily. Although there's always a learning curve with a new tool, but we'll help you along that path. The second step is to, after you've sort of done that effort to get your building data, energy data, and water data into the tool, is to submit it to us, again, through the tool. So there are 2 main steps involved there. One is to review the data for possible issues. We have a built-in data quality checker in Portfolio Manager that you can run in order to ensure that there aren't any major issues. So that's one thing we recommend for sure doing. And then you submit following the instructions that we provide. We're taking a little bit of different approach this year on the submission, but hopefully it isn't super difficult. That's the goal always, right? And then the last part is maybe the most time intensive, but again, hopefully most of what we're asking for is pretty straightforward, is completing a supplemental survey. The supplemental survey is required for each campus or submission. So if you have an institution with multiple campuses and you want all of them to participate, those will need to be submitted with a corresponding response to the survey. All right, so with that overview, I'm now going, and I see we have some questions flowing in. That's great. Please keep them coming. We are going to make sure in the Q&A that we get to as many of the questions as we can, and I think God willing, we'll get to all of them. Now I'm going to get into each of the individual steps here. So how to benchmark an Energy Star Portfolio Manager for this initiative. So the main submission we are asking for in the second round, just like in the first round, is at the campus level. We're not looking for individual building data. We're looking for your data at a campus level. To benchmark your campus, you have two main options. One is to submit a single property that represents the entire campus. And two is to submit a parent property that's associated with multiple individual child properties. That language might sound a little funny. I'll explain more about it if you're not familiar in the next slides. You'll receive a scorecard for each campus that you submit. All that we're collecting through the portfolio manager data submission is energy use, water use, if you're submitting it, it's optional, and gross floor area for your buildings. So there's a lot of, there's a lot of bells and whistles to portfolio manager, a lot of different fields, things you could fill out. All we're looking for through the tool that we're collecting is the energy use, water use, and floor area for your buildings. And the instructions that we link to for, on the higher education, on the web page for this initiative go through, link to additional information about how to get water and energy data into the tool. All right, so now I'm going to dig a little more into those two options, two main options for how to participate. So the first option was a single property representing multiple buildings. This option is really great for those who haven't yet benchmarked in the tool. And I have a screenshot here of, of the tool when I was practicing manually entering a building. And you can see that I've selected that the property represents more than one building and noted that it contains 30 buildings. This approach is really leveraging, it's almost like treating your entire campus like a single building. You'll just have a single property record in the tool, not all the data slice and dice across each individual building. So it's a very, we think, easy way to participate for this initiative if you're new to the tool. The other approach is really more geared for those that either have individual building data in the tool already or are interested in going for broke on benchmarking in the tool and getting all that individual data in there now. And through this approach, you create, you've already benchmarked your individual building data. So you have all that data in there. You create a new property, and we call this a parent property. And from it, you connect with all those individual children properties, all the individual buildings you already created. And when you make that connection, you can set it up so the energy and water meters from the individual buildings are connected with the parent property. And so all that data flows up to the parent. What you'll actually be submitting to us for the initiative is just the parent property. So again, through this initiative, we're only interested in the campus data. That's what we're using as the point of comparison. So if you're already benchmarking in the tool, this is an easy way to handle that data by creating a new property, a level up, where all the data flows automatically into that parent. The only thing you have to make sure to check on is that the gross floor area does not roll up. So you'll have to put in that total value for the campus for gross floor area at the parent property level. So that's something you'll have to do. All right, so there's a lot of stuff there. I know this can be confusing. And again, we do have that instructions document that links to and walks through all of this in more detail. That is on the Higher Education Benchmarking Initiative webpage. So that's up there now if you want to look, and we'll also be following up with these slides where all the links are available. Okay, so the second thing I want to talk about is just the separate submission for residential building data. This is a new offering this year where we're allowing people to submit separate residential building data, not just the campus data. We're only allowing one submission per organization, and what they submit is really up to them in terms of it could be a single building, single residential building, or it could be multiple residential buildings. And provided enough responses are received, what participants will see here is a scorecard that compares the performance of whatever data they submitted, whether that's one building or multiple, against the lot of all the other residential building data submitted. So that's sort of like conceptually what you're really submitting is residential building data, and that's what you're being compared against. But whether it's one building or multiple is really your call. There are a few different ways to handle this in Portfolio Manager. Both of the mechanisms I just went through, for campus benchmarking are still the same. You could create a single property in Portfolio Manager that represents multiple buildings. So that's like the easy route if you're not already benchmarking in the tool. You can also create a parent property that's associated with multiple individual child properties. So if you're already benchmarking in the tool, that's the easy route for you. And the last option is you can create a single property that represents just a single building. You could just submit one building to us, and that's what you'll get your comparison done on. Again, with this submission, we're only capturing energy and optionally water use and gross floor area, nothing else. And just want to underscore, so this is really meant for residential buildings only. We just want student residence halls and dormitories and other housing. That's what we're looking for in this section. All right, so I just went through these three options. The first two, again, are the same as the last campus submission. It's just we're talking about residential buildings. So same for that one, same for this one. The last one is the new one. You can see here, I'm just choosing that the property represents one single building. So that's the single building option. All right, and with that last part, I just want to underscore we're only allowing one submission. So you can't submit 20 individual buildings one by one and get scorecards for each one. We're only going to provide one scorecard back to each organization. It could be for one building if they want to do that route, or it could be for all their residential buildings if they wanted to do that. All right. And I forgot that we have poll questions. For those of you that I was getting on a roll here. I think we can ignore it. If you already responded, thank you. But I'm sorry, that was my fault. So, okay, so I went through, I'm now done with step one on benchmarking in Portfolio Manager. I know many of you have questions. We will get back to those. But I at least want to go through the main structure first for what this all means. The second step is really simple. Submit your data to us. And we have this list here that you go through start to finish that will help you do that. It involves establishing a connection with another contact in the account. You'll look for a specific user or account that you'll connect with. After that approval is made, so that process should be pretty easy. We have a contact and connection feature in the tool. After that approval is done, then you go through a process to share the properties with that account. So that's how we're doing the connection this year is all through that sharing functionality. And just like with the other instructions where we link to other information about how to benchmark in the tool, we also have more information about this sharing functionality and how to get it done. All right, and the third and final step is completing a supplemental survey. We're encouraging everyone to submit the portfolio manager data to do the benchmarking and submission before filling out the survey because the sequence there matters. Some of the data that you fill into portfolio manager is needed for that supplemental survey. This survey captures a characteristics that we'll use to establish peer groups. So it's really the peer grouping information, if you want to think about it that way. It has 3 sections. The first is general information, second is campus level, and the third is residential building data. That last section is optional because we aren't requiring anyone to submit residential building data, but if you do fill it out, if you are submitting residential building data, then you'll have to fill that out. Again, you'll have to fill out this supplemental survey multiple times if you're submitting multiple campuses. So that first and second section. And one nice feature I think that we offered this year that we didn't before is you can save your responses and come back to them at any time. We still have that overarching deadline of September 1st, but this we hope will make it easier. Sort of if you don't have all your data on hand at one point, you can start filling it out, come back to it and just make sure you submit on time. You'll get a copy of your responses after you do the final submission, and both like on a window that pops up as well as over email, whatever email you entered while filling it out. And I already said that if you submit multiple campuses, you'll need to complete the survey for each one, but that's an important point. And here's a quick screenshot of the first section of the supplemental survey. I think it's a pretty slick software, so hopefully it works well for you all too. And just a few more slides before we can get to your questions. So just to step back a second, what we're looking for through this initiative, we're looking for calendar year 2021 data. So energy use data, water use data optionally, gross floor area, since that can change from year to year. We're looking for that calendar year of data. Again, energy data is required, water is optional. Data accuracy and completeness is really important. It will help you out because the responses will be meaningful to you. It will help other people out since other participants will have a better sort of peer comparison. It's, they won't be looking, at wonky data and trying to understand what it means. And I did mention earlier, I think that this year we're taking sort of a harder stance, which is sort of a bummer, but we'll flag any data that's unusual, follow up with folks. If they don't have, if they aren't able to submit in time, again, we'll work with them to try and submit it on time. We will exclude it from the scorecard and they won't be able to participate formally. We're doing that this year just to try and really focus on data quality and make the comparison the strongest we can. Okay, and a couple last points here. So residential data, again, I mentioned it's optional. This submission is separate from the campus data, which is the main sort of submission for the HEBI. As a reminder, we're looking for complete energy use, both at the campus level and for the residential data submission. So we need to see all the energy that your buildings use. You can't submit one or more residential buildings that really use energy and natural gas, but electricity and natural gas, but you're just submitting electricity data. We need the full picture. So you'll need metering for all fuels used for those buildings in order to participate. And again, the corresponding survey questions, supplemental survey questions for the residential data submission are required only for those that are submitting that data. All right, and then I plan to, I know I went pretty fast through everything, hopefully not too fast. Really want to focus on questions, but I did have a couple of planted FAQs. So if you'll bear with me here, sort of anticipating that there would be some questions about how to define the boundary of a campus. It's a little bit of a gray area, right? But for the purposes of this initiative, we're defining a campus as a geographically contiguous collection of buildings that function as a single property and include a variety of building types typical of a college or university. So that's really what we're looking for the campus submission is geographically contiguous, sort of functionally a single property, if you're looking at a high level, and that there's a variety of building types typically found in a college or university campus. The usage data, energy and water use data, and floor area that you submit should meet that definition and be as complete as possible in representing everything on campus. So not cutting out energy use or water use or floor area from any buildings or from outdoor space, anything like that. So we're asking you to include all energy and water use on campus. That would include things like street lights, if you own them, parking, sprinklers. We're looking at the sort of like entire, the entire campus footprint. Please do not include, or sorry, please do include buildings that the institution leases where consumption data is available and that are located on campus, like auxiliary student housing. So even if you don't own the building, but you do have access to the data, that should be included if it's on campus. Please do not submit, I got it right that time, energy and water data for individual buildings that are located outside of the campus boundary. So an example of that is like an office building that's located in a downtown area separate from the rest of the campus. If the campus was rural and sort of geographically separate. So those are our sort of take on campus definitions. If you have further questions, please reach out to us and we can weigh in. And this is my last canned FAQ, and then we can get to all your questions. The benefits of participating, so you can receive one or more scorecards showing how you compare with peers. It's free. You can get listed publicly as having participated in the initiative. You can do that through social media and through other channels. We'll also be sharing a list publicly of institutions that agree to being listed. So it's a good sort of kudos for your efforts. I see the initiative really as an opportunity to springboard efforts on energy performance, water performance, being involved with our program more through earning EPA recognition, making improvements, all that stuff. So to me, that's really the main thing is use this as a way to improve and earn recognition for that. And you can contribute lastly to EPA's efforts to advance building energy performance. So just noting that your efforts to participate here are not lost on us. They're really helping us move this sector forward. So, all right. And I think with that, we can get to our Q&A portion. So if you've asked questions, we've captured those, just rest assured, and we'll try to get to as many of them as we can, live and or through the chat. But please keep them coming if you have other questions that have come up. And I'm going to ask Marissa with RETEC Advisors, which is supporting us on the Higher Education Benchmarking Initiative, to help sort of triage and get those questions loaded up.
Thanks so much.
And Marissa, your volume is a little low.
Oh, okay. I think last time I slowly start to get louder. Is it getting better?
Yes, it is.
Okay. Just that interval sound. But welcome everyone. Again, my name is Marissa Mitzner. I'm with RETEC Advisors. RETEC is supporting Energy Star on this effort. We supported them last year and we're very excited to be supporting them this year. So if you receive emails from RETAC advisors, just know we're a familiar face behind the scenes. We'll probably be reaching out to you if there's any questions about the data that you've submitted so that you can go back and update that data so that it's as accurate as possible. Because as Brendan mentioned, the more accurate the data is, the better the results will be for everyone. So thank you in advance for taking your time to put in that accurate data. Also, we're going to putting in my colleague Jasmine will be putting in an email address to reach out to us. If you have any questions about the supplemental survey, please reach out to us. As well, any data specific questions should be related to Energy Star. In the instructions document on the website, there is resources to reach out to Energy Star around benchmarking or Brendan, of course, for anything specific. So please do refer to that website. But I'm going to go ahead and get started with some Q&A. So Brendan, I'm going to start off with a couple of kind of like basic questions here just to talk about round 2 here. So just to confirm, if you didn't participate in the first round, can you still participate in the second round?
Yes, thank you for the question, but yes, you can totally participate in the second round if you're new.
And then can you just give a couple high-level overview of what's different from round 1 to round 2?
So the main differences are we're doing a robust follow-up exercise on data quality to try and get bad data out of the initiative and out of the scorecards. That's one. 2 is we're trying to create peer groups that are based on more than one variable or characteristic. So that will be a big effort, and it's a little bit, unclear at this point exactly how that will turn out, but our goal is to create peer groups, so you're being compared against institutions based on 2 or more characteristics or variables. Third, we are going to include site EUI in addition to source EUI as a point of comparison. So people that participate will see that was one thing that we got feedback on. And I think there was one other point, but I'm blanking. So let me stop there and I'll try and think if it comes back to me.
Well, I'm going to add in one additional point because we definitely have a lot of questions around it. Is residential data is optional this year as well?
Right. Thank you. I think that was it. Is that we're creating that new way to get a separate comparison just for residential building data, which was sort of in response to a request for a more unique comparison at if not at individual building level, at least by building type.
And before we jump into some of the questions around residential building data, a question around just submitting data in general is, asking for 2021 calendar year as opposed to fiscal or academic year. And it seems like we've had a lot of questions trickle in around flexibility and wiggle room around that. Can you just kind of maybe give a little more explanation of why we're asking for calendar 2021 year as opposed to fiscal year or academic year?
Yes. And I fully get the concern that many folks have raised here. Unfortunately, because academic calendars and budget, fiscal cycles can differ from one institution to the next across the country, we really felt like we had to go with calendar year. So we are, in order to make this a fair comparison, we are going to hold strong unless we get overwhelming feedback that it's impossible or people just don't have that data. We are going to go with the calendar year 2021 data. It worked in the first round, but please reach out to us if you absolutely can't. It really is intended to create a fair comparison, again, because if you imagine different periods of performance at different institutions could correlate with different campus activity. So if my summer and your summer don't align, but we're asking for this or that data, it really creates a inconsistency.
Thank you. And then COVID was obviously a big part of the past couple of years. How is that considered as part of the submission?
It's a good question. We did specifically ask questions in the supplemental survey about impacts from COVID. So we're pretty fully expecting that we'll have to create, one of those characteristics I was mentioning that we're using as peer groups will be sort of a broad strokes impact from COVID. So different institutions had different impacts. We'll try to group you with similar institutions that had, based on the impact from COVID.
Great, thank you. And also just wanted to refer people back to the website that Brendan did note. There's also a PDF sample of the questions on there. It doesn't show all the drop-down questions, but there is a PDF, so you will get an idea of what some of those questions are, as well as some other information specifically that's been talked about in this webinar. So just will want to make sure I keep referring everyone back to that website. So Brendan, going into some of the submissions around the buildings themselves. So my college has a single building, central plant, offices included in its portfolio. Are all of these submitted under one property?
Yes, central plant, I'm a little bit unclear on exactly, is that, higher education is sort of weird. You think about it, most buildings don't have like little power plants attached to them. We're really looking for commercial and multifamily buildings. The central plant, unless it's heated and cooled, which it might be, I guess. So I'm sorry, I'm sort of evolving my answer as I'm talking. I think yes, the answer is include everything. And if you're not already benchmarking, the easiest way to do that is to benchmark as a single property in Portfolio Manager. So you would just include all of your energy data, all of your floor area data, optionally all of your water data, and that's what you'd submit to us. And in the supplemental survey, we'll ask for additional information about your campus that we'll use for peer grouping.
Great. For residential buildings, can we submit residential building data without a campus submission, or do the two have to be done together?
Sorry. So you could submit just residential building data, or you could submit just campus data. There isn't any direct tie. Just to clear up one potential area of confusion, if you're submitting campus data and your campus has residence halls or dorms on it, has student housing on it, that should be included in that submission. The residential submission is a separate one, but you could do one or both. That's your choice.
Great. So thank you. If our institution has multiple campuses, would we make each campus a parent property, or would we need an additional parent property to umbrella each campus into one property?
Thanks for that question. So the way you would do that is each campus would have its own parent property. There actually isn't functionality in the tool, and I'm sorry, this gets a little silly, but we don't have grandchild or grandparent functionality in the tool. We just have parent-child. Child properties can be associated with multiple parents, but going too far, the answer is create separate parents for each campus.
Thank you. So for residential building data, will a new parent group be comprised of the residential buildings need to be created? Let me rephrase this. I guess, Brenda, maybe it seems like we are getting a lot of questions about residential data, which is wonderful to hear the excitement coming in for it. So could you just go over maybe just a little bit more in detail when submitting residential data, some of the data that will be expected to be submitted for residential data?
Sure. So what we're looking for the residential data, as mentioned, you can include one or more buildings. We're looking for complete energy use and optionally water use for those buildings. So you need to have metering in place for all fuels serving that building or those buildings. And that's really it on the portfolio manager side is energy use, complete water use, and floor area for those buildings. We're just looking at here, obviously, the residential or student buildings. In the supplemental survey, we have a corresponding set of questions that relate to the residential data that we'll use for creating peer groups. And that's a little tougher to summarize on the fly, but we have a number of things there. But in terms of the like data we're looking for, that, I covered that already. So
What about staff housing complexes? Should that also be included in the residential data?
yes, it should be. We might need to add that as an FAQ to our webpage, but I appreciate the question. Yes, any housing can be included. And you can, like I was trying to say earlier, you could submit all of your residential building data as one submission. That's, to me, that's the most exciting thing to sort of see as a comparison. And in that case, it would be great to include that staff housing.
And then to kind of confirm, to bring maybe a little bit, rounding out some of the questions that are coming in for that. So we have 2 buildings at our site. One building consists primarily of classrooms, offices, and student residence wings. The other building is a postgraduate apartment building. Can I include data for both buildings?
Yes, so you could include data for both. Just to be clear, how you'd submit that for the HEBI is for the campus submission, the main submission, you'd include both buildings. What we'd be interested in is seeing the total energy use and water use and floor area associated with those buildings, not them individually. And you'd answer questions in the supplemental survey related to that, those, both those buildings together. And then optionally, you could submit the apartment building separately for the residential data submission. And we'd have a separate section in the supplemental survey associated with that building. So you could include both, but for the campus, again, we're looking for the whole thing. Residential data is a little wigglier. You could choose how to proceed in terms of number of buildings.
Great, and we're getting quite a few questions about questions whether it comes to specifically with parent companies and also the data quality checker. So Brendan, just to confirm, if there's any questions about using Portfolio Manager around benchmarking, entering data, the data quality checker, which is great. I'm really glad people are going to be using that. That should be going to the Energy Star Help website, and I can include that into the chat for everyone to reach out to Energy Star for those particular type of questions that may be nuanced for your particular submission.
Yes, and I'll add on our higher education benchmarking initiative webpage that I added in the chat, as well as in this slide deck that we'll send around. We have a registration link for an Ask the Expert session. So we're going to have a set aside time where we can get into your technical weedy questions about how to participate in the initiative with a live person sort of walking through the tool to help. So I do encourage you to register for that on July 27th at 12. If there's a lot of demand or you can't participate on that session, we'll set up another one. And we're also always available to answer questions.
So Brendan, with older universities that have built multiple residence halls over time, what would be the best way to determine which buildings data to submit?
Oh, I appreciate the question. We've always found sort of a weaker relationship between the age of buildings and their energy performance. I'm not trying to say that's true for your organization, but I would encourage you to submit everything that you can. And we ask for questions in the supplemental survey that are meant to create groups, fair sort of comparison groups, in order to get at those things that really do impact performance, which could be age, but could be many other things like the number of students or number of residents. So I would encourage you to include everything and everything that you can, and then we'll do our best to create peer groups that are meaningful and and are tied to performance.
Great, thank you. And then for the data, will the submissions will the higher education building HEBI normalize or adjust campus energy or water performance based on characteristics of campus and buildings I am benchmarking? So basically, how will the data submitted be adjusted or normalized?
So the data themselves will not be normalized or adjusted. I believe, I should know this, but I believe last year we tried to do weather normalized energy use metrics, which if we're able to do that, we'll do that again. That's something that the tool develops automatically. So that's nothing that you have to worry about. Beyond that, we aren't sort of doing anything too crazy on adjusting for business activity or anything there. That's really the intent of those peer groups that we're creating is to that will be sort of like, you know, I'm compared against other schools that are in my climate zone and have the same Carnegie classification, for example. So that's sort of how we're handling the normalization question. Fully recognize it's not sort of you know, fully built out or perfect, but we're doing the best that we can through this initiative with the hopes also that long term we can develop 1 to 100 scores that would be sort of more fine toothed and even more tied to performance.
How do I enter district steam, district hot water, or chilled water? How is that considered? With or what about my central utility plant?
So if your buildings are using energy, district energy, then that definitely needs to be included. What we're looking for, again, through the HEBI submission is campus level data primarily. So for the residential building data, if you don't have those fuels metered at the building level or a group of residential buildings, then they unfortunately wouldn't be able to participate because that data, without that data, we're not getting a clear picture of their total energy use, sort of to make a fair comparison between different institutions and buildings. For the campus submission, you should be able to benchmark in the tool that, you know, include that data for all your campus buildings. And we have a technical reference on how to do that that we can make sure gets highlighted on our webpage. And maybe we can add it to the chat too.
Brendan, you went over what should be included as part of the campus boundary, but are there certain things to be mindful of what should be excluded?
The only real thing, appreciate the question. The only real thing that I can think of is something that isn't on the campus. In the last cycle, we were trying to do something a little different, have people exclude things like parking and, you know, street lights or lamps, sprinklers, you know, sort of outdoor water use. This year we're trying to, because it was sort of confusing to implement, this year we're trying to just have people submit everything that's on the campus to us. So all energy use, all water use, all floor area. So we're not looking for you to exclude anything from that.
For utility bills that are pretty kind of separated or split between January and December, how should I account for my utility bills that are split between the months?
That's a good question. When you enter your bills into Portfolio Manager, it will handle that calendarization. So you need, in order to get a full year of data, you'll have to enter bills that cover the entire period. So it'll, you know, before at least January 1st, if not before. and at least December 31st, if not after. Portfolio manager will do that, that work though, so you don't have to sort of do that allocation yourself.
Great, thank you. Well, Brenda, I think we're coming up on the question and the time of the webinar. So I just want to end. Can you remind us, when is the submission deadline again?
Sure thing. So the submission deadline is September 1st of 2022. So 6 weeks from now. But hopefully you can get it in before then. We're here to help. But that is the deadline for the second round.
Thank you. And thank you everyone for submitting your questions. If you have any other final questions, please continue submitting them and we'll try to address as many as we can, whether offline or at least help us inform our FAQs that will be placed on the website. And Brendan, I'm going to bring it back over to you to close this out.
Great. Yeah, I don't really have much else to say. I appreciate everyone's time. If we didn't get to your questions, we do have a registration list, and I think we have enough information to follow up. Do feel free to contact us. So I have my email address listed here. That's probably the main place you can get your questions answered if you have them. We also have a help desk that Marissa was referring to. So that's a great resource. You can see FAQs. You can also submit questions to support that we'll get back to you within a few hours. And we have a lot of sort of canned training materials, training resources on all this stuff. I know it's a lot to get into if you're brand spanking new, but we're hopeful that once you get started, it's actually not too complicated. It's more of a question of getting it done. So, and again, that Ask the Expert session on 27th at 12, encourage you to register for it. But thank you all for attending and participating, and hope you have a great rest of the day and you're able to join this year. Thanks. Thanks, Marissa.
Thank you all. Bye.